listeners, to the Cosmic Confluence podcast with your host, Sana, a space where spirit meets self, timelines merge, and the multidimensional truths ripple into everyday life. Now, today we're exploring a question that has echoed across ancient temples and modern minds alike. What if miracles aren't random, but rather they are co creations waiting for our alignment? And what if celestial guidance isn't outside of us, but it's kind of coursing, pulsing gently within, waiting to be remembered? And joining us today is Seph Dietlin. He is a potential activator, angel communicator, and a guide for those ready to step into the frequency of divine co-creation. Let me share a bit about Seph with all of you. After a soul awakening moment in 2002, Seph left behind a thriving real estate career to follow a higher calling, one that has taken him from filmmaking to energy healing, from deep angelic communication to helping others access their own superhuman potential. And in this episode, we'll talk about how manifesting miracles, dancing with the quantum field, and receiving celestial support in a time when the old world is falling apart in front of us and the new earth is rising. So, with that, Seth, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us.
It's an honor to have, and it's an honor to be here. And what a wonderful way to articulate all of that, and especially what we're all in the middle of, which is emerging into a new version of
Mhm.
ourselves, which makes our conversation today even just that much more relevant. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth, for your kind words. And I mean, when I was reading through your intro, your awakening came at the edge of a personal loss. A theme so many of our listeners they can relate to. In fact, I can relate to. Um, what was it about that moment that activated your, this connection, divine connection to the angelic realm, and how did it shift your understanding of manifestation? Something which kind of has been so much misunderstood.
Right. So, on the day that we often refer to as that pivot point where something awakens in us and we realize that the world that we think we live in isn't the world that we actually live in at all. And prior to that moment, we believe we live in this sort of solid, real world, that it's us versus it, and that there are forces bigger than us that actually have the strings of creation, and that we have no influence in the reality that we experience at all. And when that pivots, it gives us the opportunity to explore our higher knowing, where we know the truth, which is completely opposite to everything that was just mentioned. And for that moment, for me, as a real estate agent, I was not only in a one sided relationship at the time, but I had one of those days where every transaction that I had worked to create had collapsed, the canceled escrows, we call it here. And I also was in a relationship that was one sided in so many ways, including financial. And when I had that big of a blow on my professional day, I came home in an attempt to create a new understanding of mutuality. But instead of that being the result was a huge breakup, which was felt like a rejection. So it felt like everything that was important to me had literally collapsed in that day. And it was in that moment that I know that I wanted to access something greater than my
Mm.
own power. And I said a prayer, you could call it that. And the first request was going to be that I could fall asleep and go back to wherever that realm is that we come from. And we all have had, well, I don't want to speak for everyone, but many of us, and I hear this a lot from people, we have those moments where it gets a little rough around the edges here. And we're like, hey, where's the off button to this? And I had that
Mhm.
moment. And the minute the request came from me, I knew right away that it was being pushed back and it wasn't at all going to happen in that way. So, as a good real estate agent, I gave the divine creator a counter offer. I said, that's fine. If you're not going to take me while I sleep and take me back and to extricate me from this place, then I want my
Mm.
angels. I want to talk to them and I want a very real connection with them. And immediately, I felt the presence of them. I felt them touch me in a very healing way. And I heard them speak to me through a download or through telepathy. And if that wasn't enough, because that certainly could have been seen as a figment of my imagination, my dog and cat jumped up on the bed and were looking around because they could sense the presence of
Yeah.
these celestial beings in the room as well. Now, the relationship with manifesting is, taken this 2 decades to really allow that introduction, their wisdom, the relationship with them, and re understanding the context of life in a human body through that guidance. And what it's basically come around to, at least at this point, or evolved to, is that manifestation and the reason why the celestials are so eager to help us with manifestation, it isn't because the universe is some order taker that wants to fulfill our ego needs. Actually, manifesting, as you mentioned, is a co creation with the divine field. And because
Mm.
it is exactly that, each time we co create or receive a miracle, it is an act of love directly from the creator and the quantum field to us. And we are in a relationship with it, as invisible as it may seem to us and as non external and completely internal as it is, we get to know that every time we co create something miraculous and wonderful, not only is the creator experiencing it through us, but the creator is facilitating this creation as a way of bringing us closer to it.
Wow. Yeah, that really, really sounds beautiful. I mean, you really went far beyond, like you surrendered into a new dimension of co-creation.
Mhm.
But if you would, try to explain it to someone who may not believe into all this, like someone who is you know, um, skeptic about this, I mean, how would you explain to them, whether it's all real or not?
Yeah, it depends on the person. And very often, of course, a person who is skeptical is just someone who is primarily oriented towards their logical mind. Now, I'll point out that we have two minds. And no matter how much we rely on or lean into logic, we all still use both minds. And there is a way of pointing out, and this isn't just hyperbole, this is science. So our brain waves are measured in wavelengths, and those wavelengths are measured in hertz. And when we are in the full waking state, there is a certain brainwave state. And we know what that's like because we're stressed out. We're afraid of something. We're actually afraid of something, even if we don't have anything directly
Mm.
to be afraid of. We're just afraid of being in this world or whatever. And then when we get into a relaxed state, our thoughts become less restrictive and more open. And the more relaxed we get, the more open we become. In fact, even when the most pragmatic people are laying on their deathbed and they know that it's about time for them to finish this experience, they start to relax into their awareness or their higher mind. And because there are two minds, we don't talk about the fact that there are two minds. We think that there is just one. So for someone who may be skeptical, it depends on their openness to become aware of something new. There are some people who just don't want to hear something new because they live in a construct and they have a certain rigidity about preserving that construct. And
Mm.
of course, what we're finding out now as we move through the world as it changes, no one is allowed anymore to remain attached to a construct, especially if it's a false one. And one of the biggest false constructs is that we live in a pragmatic world where science and logic are the dominant forces, and that
Mhm.
those are strictly the creative forces. And we see something different, and we see it that's very real. But everyone has an experience or a curiosity to believing that beyond the limitations of the way that they construct reality, that there is something more. Everyone has a suspicion of that. So I would first travel around that with a person if they're really interested in exploring. But the way that I explain it would start with some pragmatism of realizing how different our mind is based on where we are in wavelengths, such as when we dream. When we dream, we're in a heightened state. And that's why we're able to dream or imagine things. And we've all had dreams or understand what they are. Or imagining or also our innovation. Our innovation comes from the higher mind. So if we have a good idea, and that always comes from our higher mind and not our the mind that we consider the construct that we live in. And that's where I would start with them.
That makes sense. That makes sense, Seth. Okay, now let's talk about the angels. You have mentioned that um, the angels taught you the quantum field of intelligence. So how exactly does this look like in practice, and how it changes the way we manifest our desires?
Yes, I love this question. So first of all, when we're seeking out the angels or imagine the quantum field, and the quantum field, for my understanding, is just the divine realm. So we always imagine that it has to show up as a sci-fi visual. So the angels have to fling open our windows. They come in, they've got wings, they've got halos, and they're like, hey, dude, what's going on? Surf's up, right? And it's not like that at all. And then we think of the quantum field as this like golden energy that somehow or another is going to encircle us in the physical world. And neither of those are true. So the quantum field is the field of intelligence that's oriented via love or nonlinear intelligence. So anytime we are in a state of love, and that isn't just romantic love, but it's gratitude, which is a derivative of love, appreciation,
Mm.
joy, peace, generosity, all of those have a different frequency. They feel different. In fact, we recognize them when we're in the presence of others. When we're in the presence of someone who's stingy, we can feel that energy. When we're in the field of someone who's generous, we can feel that energy. We can feel the signature. When we're in the presence of someone who's kind or unkind, we can feel the difference without them saying anything else. So angels is a reference to a field of communication or a field of communication that can communicate wisdom and guidance that is encircled or embedded in the quantum field, which is in that heart or loving energy. When I teach angel communication, the first thing that I do is teach people how to access the heart or love even more. One of the tips that I give people for manifesting, which is also the same tip for bringing in, a greater relationship with the angels is to focus on everything that we love, because love is just something that we're aware of. When we're aware of love, that's when we get into that activated state. And we know what it feels like inside our bodies or inside our minds when we're
Mhm.
in the state of love. And we know what it feels like inside our minds and inside our bodies when we're in the field of fear. So, as long as we're in that feeling space, that means we occupy that space. We can all understand that there's a piece of us that is still in that divine realm, which is the eternal essence of us, and that there's a piece of us that is in this reality simultaneously. And there's a communication link in between the two, and that is our angels. So when we remove the construct that they have to show up in a physicalized form and
Mhm.
in a way that is visible to us in the physical realm, and we understand that they're going to show up in other ways as reality unfolds, then that's where that really begins to accelerate. Now, I myself personally, and I know other people who have ended up having an interaction with a person in real life. And the person showed up at a very potent time with something very potently helpful, and then somehow or another vanishes without any logical explanation about where they went to or where they came from. And that can happen as well, but that's not the primary way in which we access that field. And they love guiding us to remain connected to that energy field of love, because that is the energy that creates or co creates all of the miracles. And simply put, we know wonderful people who are mostly happy, joyful, loving, and generous people. And we watch as they just have the best luck in the world. And we can also watch simultaneously that we know people and maybe even phases in our own life where we're not so connected to love, generosity, and that positive energy. And we know that at that time, we also find that we end up with the greatest challenges as well. Now, that doesn't always mean that a challenge is a cue of being out of alignment, because sometimes it comes with the express goal of expanding us. But ultimately, that's the best way that I can explain that in practical sense so that we can access it more often.
That is absolutely mm, surreal. I mean, yes, everything around is energy. It's positive or it's negative. Then there are vibrations, frequencies attached with the energies, and it definitely makes sense, especially when what you mentioned that mentioned that sometimes when we are having difficult times, and then a person with a kind of positive angelic energy, they come into our lives, and somehow things start to fall in place.
Mhm.
Or have like the smallest of the moments, but they can really really lead up to something bigger in your life. So
Absolutely, yes.
that is really really true, and this has happened with me. I know many of my friends, my parents, they all have their own share of stories, to help us validate that yes, this is possible, this happens. And also, as we are talking about miracles, before we wrap up, you say that miracles are not as anomalies, but they are natural outcomes when we align with higher consciousness. um so you have described it, but then I would love to know what are some of the common blocks that prevent people from experiencing them, and how can they begin to shift?
Right, that's good. So, what will happen is that we can tune in to the energy of miracles through the heart, through the feeling of love, the awareness of love. And we will notice that things will be more aligned. And we can say, oh, wow, I'm in a wave of good things. or we can say right away, wow, look at these miracles, look at this miraculous shift. And if we own that it's that, it will increase just through our belief. So, belief is a very pivotal key, and it doesn't expect that we're all in from the beginning. The best part about the relationship that we have with the quantum field is it will take us on a trust journey, especially if we've had traumatizing moments in our life, which leave us in mostly survival mode. Then what will happen is the angelic field will allow us to take a slower journey into seeing how our trust pays off in real life. And as that happens, and we do that, the faith and the trust is one of the things that opens the way. So the love and being in the frequency, along with the belief, those
Mhm.
two are very powerful keys. And when those two keys are basically set at
Mhm.
another setting that contradicts the miracles, then we shut them off and it looks like that's the default setting of life. When we practice life from a purely pragmatic sense,
Mhm.
that doesn't shut off the miracles, it shuts off the perception of them, right? My,
True.
we all know, for example, when our parents share the story of how they met, and we've met amazing people. There was a
Mhm.
moment that that person wasn't known to us, and the moment they arrived, they're known to us ever since. There's a moment always where everything shifts. And the flow of life, if you like that word better than miracles, because it doesn't require that you believe in magic or hocus pocus, right? Is the flow of life. You could say that. And if someone wants to live in a more pragmatic way and have the ability to influence, in other words, overcome the obstacle, as you say, you can just refer to miracles as the flow of life. And in that case,
Mhm.
you could also just say that isn't it funny that the more love I express, the more I'm in my heart space, the more life just flows for me. And maybe it doesn't have to take a mystical and celestial form where you're communicating with angels and manifesting miracles. Maybe it's just, wow, my life is full of joy and it
Mhm.
flows very nicely. That's okay too. Interestingly enough, the love, the vibration of love,
Mhm.
and the belief are key components. But here's what life does to us very commonly, and it does it in such a sneaking way. It actually presents us with many opportunities to occupy our mind in an alternate frequency. And it isn't to demonize anything because it's just frequency. But say, for example, and this is something that I notice could happen to me. Let's say a friend sends me a message on Instagram, and I go in, and of course, the algorithm knows me better than my own companion and knows exactly what will steal my awareness. There's a video right there of someone who gets their justice from a dash cam video, right? Someone who did something, got caught on dash cam, and then, of course, they didn't get away with it, right? So then, oh
Mhm.
gosh, before I get to the message, I need to click on this, right? And
Mhm.
watch this person get their justice. Well, that's a construct of the mind to really need to see that. And then it takes me into that space and it brings me into a space where I'm no longer connected to my heart because my heart should actually want the good for both of those people, right? But that's just an everyday example. There's so many things that take us out of the joy. The other is that when life becomes complex and
Mhm.
busy and so overly potent with things that have a negative charge, by engaging with them, they take us out of connection. Now,
Mhm.
I don't watch the news, for example, because I know that
Mhm.
it propagates a frequency that will cancel out my connection to the quantum field. Now, if there is an event that happened in the United Kingdom today, I can't do anything about it, and I can't help the people involved by knowing about it. I can only send positive energy around the world and hold the space for miracles here and let that be the trend. But again, these are practical examples of things that are in our day. And I like to use the example that, let's say we decide we're going to work out, we're going to get a really nice lean body. The next thing you know, we discover all the things that we're eating that have sugar hidden in the ingredients. So, if we remember that belief and the frequency of love are key
Mhm.
ingredients in connecting us to that flow of life and those miracles, any place where the alternate frequency is available is a hidden saboteur. So we get the opportunity to actually be mindful of being in our heart space and being in a space, if not just believing blindly, at least being open to the possibility, right? And that could be something like, I haven't seen something happen yet, but maybe it will. Instead of saying it can't happen because I haven't seen it happen yet. Totally different thing. And what's great is that when we tell the quantum field, our angels, or the divine creator, when we say, I'm open to a new belief, then the
Mhm.
flow of life or miracles will send something to actually give you another experience to solidify a new belief, therefore building in on that key of belief for co-creation and manifestation.
Mm. I really appreciate that, instead of just forcing down or maximizing the effort of making someone who is more practical, pragmatic and a bit of a skeptic into, just forcing them on them the concept of miracles. It can be defined more as, from a perspective of the life flowing, the flow of life. And then these events which you may think cannot happen, they can happen, and then it will give birth to a new belief within you.
Yeah.
So it definitely needs that clarity to embrace that newness.
Yes.
Yeah, you were saying something, Sir.
Oh, yes. Well, and it's interesting because even those of us who are in the space of believing it already, it actually solidifies it for us too, because it actually brings it down to practical usage. And that's the space for which we can maximize our benefit with it too. So it's good for all of us.
Brilliant, brilliant, Seth. Well, before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you, what will be the best way to do that?
Yes, visit my website, which is quantumangelmagic.com. And from that space, there is the opportunity to download a free meditation. It's a manifestation meditation, theta brainwave, bringing you into unity with the quantum field. And it's done with the three magic words modernized embedded in it and the presence of the angels calling them in. It's quantumangelmagic.com.
Great. I'll have all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And Seth, thank you so, so much. You really reminded us that manifestation is not a trick of the mind, but it's definitely a sacred, I should say, choreography of trust, alignment, and inner listening. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So, listeners, if you feel that call, if your soul is stirring, your heart is ready, or maybe your path feels uncertain, I hope that this episode can be a soft nudge from the universe, that you are not alone and the support you seek might just be whispering from within you. So, to connect with Seph, just refer to the show notes. And until next time, stay rooted in your power, open to the magic, and always stay curious about what else is possible. Thank you.